We're coming back to you with the Dead Infested versus MoonHunter series. We're not done. One more game, this time on Derelict. So these guys are the newcomers that, well, I guess 2 out of 4 newcomers that debuted within Ascension number 6 in the group stage. Both of them ended up making early exits, unfortunately. Dead Infested with a score of 1 win to 3 losses, and MoonHunter to a score of 0 and 4, which is obviously going winless always sucks, always stings a little bit more. But that being said, obviously MoonHunter has the gravitas to come back and continue playing. I think he played some matches against, funnily enough, Hapsaya, a StarCraft 2 streamer, Grandmaster Protoss, RTS aficionado, whatever you want to call him. Definitely a little bit more focused on StarCraft 2 than the other games, but he's played some Age of Empires, he's played some CMBW, and apparently MoonHunter decided that he would try to cheese him. So I love that. I always love when that kind of thing happens. Now, that being said, Dead Infested, I would say, generally speaking, in a straight-up game, is going to be doing a little bit better than MoonHunter. But this time around, MoonHunter has gone for a Fulcrum first and then immediately cut gas. So he's already thinking a little bit differently, right? Our lemon Terran in the top right, that's MoonHunter. Our red Protoss in the bottom left, that is Dead Infested. Or should it be Red Infested? Well, who knows? By the way, I guess I'm going to need to do some clarification because both It Depends and Dead Infested joined with their not League IDs. They joined with like the meme IDs that they had tried to sign up as. And I guess I just need to tell people, like, the only reason I would need to... Oh, got some sass happening over here. Try to block him with the pylon. That's a little interesting. Just trying to see if he can do some more tickling. Maybe panic pulse some Masons. It's always a little bit of a psychological move. Back at home he's got a gateway coming, so nothing non-standard. But that being said, yeah, it's very interesting to see people try to do their their funny little names here and there. And yeah, over here we actually have a bit of a scuffle. It was very, very close for both of those workers to end up getting bopped. So Dead Infested manages to scarp her off. And I think if I know Dead Infested, he's going to hunt down that low HP one, that alluring low HP one. But actually, he's just going to die to the Vulture. So a little bit of anticlimax there. A second gateway coming. So we did see this a lot in this set so far. MoonHunter is going to be going mech now, trying to learn from that. He did go mech a little bit on Sideshow, had some pretty early success. That's the one where it was Cyclops or Great or whatever was the thumbnail. They just keep getting more Cyclops related, so I hope this one also is Cyclops epic. I had a game on Derelict ZVT. I was playing against Newt earlier today. I'm recording this on the 7th of November for context, so it's been quite a while since we've actually casted the first round of this. The second Fulcrum coming down for MoonHunter, as his Vulture is going to go ahead and pop the shields of the Dracoden before any reactions are had. Now, at this point, I'm not 100% sure how this trade goes. I do think it's going to go ahead and be favorable for the Dracoden, as you can see. But actually, he uses the Lobotomy Mine to interrupt the auto-targeting, which is kind of interesting. And Scarper's off behind it for safety. A Cyclops also waypointing down, so that's kind of interesting there for the early engagement. It's going to be a while before that Vulture is ready to fight again. But at the very least, he denied the early move out. And this is already looking better for MoonHunter as his second Fulcrum completes. And he's also just about ready to get another expansion if he wants to go for that. He can do so before the Protoss now because the Protoss has put down double gate. But yeah, my TVZ, when I was playing Zerg against Newt's Terran, Newt is another relative newcomer, probably the newest active player. Maybe not. There's a couple of them that are kind of like that. But I would say of the players who have been playing recently, he has been doing pretty well overall at figuring things out and practicing a lot of stuff. And he's got some experience playing other projects in the past that also have a lot of custom tech trees, like he referenced Heptacraft, I believe it's called. And yeah, so he's sticking around. He's recognizing, dude, I'm new to this community. They got a lot of interesting things going on. I'm down to try. I'm down to learn. And so he is learning. And he did end up defeating me with Cyclops, no less. So I guess Cyclops are actually busted. It must be nerfed. And that's the only thing that I can draw from that. We do have 4 Vultures here. It looks like maybe only one of them is going to have mines at the end of this. Laying one for anti-drop, which makes sense. Laying a couple for the choke. But no move out here for either player. They're playing a little bit more passively as both of them have decided to expand. And I'm really interested in tracking both of these players in terms of their progress. I know Dead Infested has been grinding out a lot more games than MoonHunter recently. I do believe MoonHunter has like a full-time job and stuff, and I'm not actually sure what Dead Infested does for his work. And it's not necessarily required to be disclosed per se, but it just, from the context that I'm aware of so far, it feels like Dead Infested might have a little bit more time to practice, or at least he's putting in more hours practicing one way or another. So whether that's due to the fact that he's got less responsibilities or just because he's making more time, either way, MoonHunter isn't playing as often. So I would suspect Dead Infested will improve at a greater rate. But one of the things that I am looking forward to seeing is how these players develop overall. And I think that Infested said he's going to be switching to Terran for the future. So that is pretty exciting. We don't really have, like, I guess the way to describe it is that the Terran players we have on file right now, it's like Nablime and Mystery Meat, who's playing as random. And I'm not sure if he'll ever dedicate himself to just playing as Terran in the future. But definitely something that is kind of interesting to think about. The two Vultures are going to go ahead and charge on in here, meet 6 Dracodons, get one shot. So that will force them back. There's not really a great amount of, like, dedicated firepower here. If there were some Matadors with this army, I'd put a little bit more stock in it, taking a head-on fight versus Striders. But, he can start to set up a counter-contain. This is not a site that you usually see as a Terran player. He's behind in Workers, which is a little bit more normal. He does also have an Idle Mason after that Watchdog. But beyond that, I'm mostly interested in seeing what is he going to be doing as his transition out of this tech. He's started to harvest gas a little bit more earnestly as well in the main, so maybe that'll coincide with some more gas harvesters in the natural at some point. Not currently doing that. The Cyclops are thinking about charging on forward, but it doesn't really look like it's something super useful. I think with the Vultures, what you would want to do is maybe like charge forward and lay some mines immediately. But either way, the Cyclops are sort of laying them in. He's going to go for a run by. There is a Warden here to protect against that. And the Cyclops, well, if they were targeting down this big stack of Dracodons, they could have actually maybe done some damage. As it stands, it looks like only 1 or 2 Scribes ended up getting popped. And then because the Vultures weren't here with this fight, I actually feel like he could have maybe run over that Dracodon army a little bit more decisively. But instead, chooses to go for a little bit of a different target. Now, he does have a couple of Cyclops that maybe can get some cheeky hits off with the lobotomy mines. I don't know if the Vultures had any mines left, but if they did, they could have also maybe laid some, chaos, sown some chaos there. Definite worker advantage still there for Dead Infested. He's got 5 in the queue, or 5 in the lead. You can hold Alt, by the way. This is something that I forgot to mention. I mentioned it in another cast coming up after this, but and I just tried to ping by Alt left-clicking over here. But if you hold Alt, you'll see the current, and if you release Alt, you'll see in queue, like taking into account what's in queue as well. So right now we have decisively more workers here than MoonHunter if you're on the Protoss side. Dead Infested is definitely going to be feeling pretty good about that. He put a Crucible at his natural. Maybe, I guess he'll speed up Scribe production, but not interested in doing so for his Ardent Authority. And it's always interesting to me what the players decide to go for. Now, this is obviously played before the group stage, so you can kind of think about this as like practice games in general. But MoonHunter, unfortunately, wasn't able to make that practice work in the group stage. And I guess in a way, neither was Dead Infested. They both do exit in 3rd place. But I think Dead Infested looked a little bit more competitive in his games, whereas MoonHunter kind of just tried to cheese Mystery Meat a lot, which, I'm down for. I appreciate it. Cyclops are going to come in and actually, ironically, frontline for the Goliaths, but those are going to be the ones that are focused down. Now, at the same time, great damage spread from the Cyclops is going to whittle down all of the Dracodons. And now we just have the Positron and double Dracodon up here. You can hug this top bar if you're MoonHunter, but it looks like instead he just wants to allow his units to charge on forward and deal some pretty good damage. At the same time, not really doing much other than breaking the shields there. And I don't even think he's going to get... Okay, he kills 1 Scribe, for all of his troubles. But the biggest thing that he was able to do there is put the Fear of God back in Dead Infested, or maybe, continue to instill fear. He's added 2 more Fulcrums. He's not got any add-ons, and he's not got any Vespine to tech up. He does have enough minerals to expand again if he wants to, but really, I think, as he's caught up in terms of worker count, so that's really cool to see. But he definitely would want to spend a little bit of more time. I mean, technically, he's down 2 workers because of this Mason. Still being idle for most of the game, but at this point, I don't think he's going to be able to penetrate the base here. You're looking at double matrix with the Crucible. They end up being machine guns, right? You have to remember, Crucibles increase efficiency of structures by 25%, and that includes attack speed for static defense. So you absolutely can get a lot of mileage out of that, and attacking into this is probably going to be a measure of, ranging it as opposed to or bypassing it entirely and circumventing it. A 5th Fulcrum on the way. You could potentially try to burst down that if you went for the Scrapyard. But that's the kind of thing, is a 3rd base coming down for MoonHunter. One of the things I'm kind of seeing about this base layout that he's got going on. And I'm just noting, I'm trying to clock here, that he's gone for all of this extra Fulcrums. He's not banking any gas for Tier 2. It looks like he might want to try to end the game here in this level of tech, and he's not really too interested in doing anything else. He wants to contain his opponent. He wants to maybe expand across the map. If it gets long enough, he can tech up, but it's not really a major focus, right? He's not harvesting gas from the ridge at his main, and maybe he'll be prioritizing minerals over here. Either way, you could be adding the scrapyards to your fulcrums, especially if you're adding new ones. You can continue pumping units out of the existing ones and then save the extra minerals for scrapyards and blackjacks and matadors, and that's when you can start to really start pummeling down the Protoss, because matadors in particular, I feel like they're slept on. Yeah, they have low effective range, but if they are on top of your enemy forces, they burst down units really, really fast in tank mode. And in Cinder mode, they can help you burn down buildings. So it kind of feels like the obvious choice against these very heavy, high HP targets. Draconins are going to end up face tanking a couple of these lobotomy mines, and there's not an immediate jump on here by MoonHunter. He's only responding now that he's under attack, but at the same time, he's got enough Cyclops here that he can absolutely push this one back. Honestly, come on, bro. I have to use this as the thumbnail. Cyclops are busted, but will they be busted enough to take down these forces? There's a lot of crowd control over here, and honestly, I think the Cyclops are just going to end up getting nuked there. Wisely, DeadInfested seems to have targeted those more than the Goliaths now, and the targeting selection by MoonHunter, by comparison, was not stellar. He did a lot of surface level damage to a couple of these units. A couple of his units did damage to the matrices, but he didn't really end up actually killing or focusing down anything. So he is going to go ahead and withdraw, use the fact that he's got a third base, and he did thin down the army of DeadInfested, crucially. Like, one of the things that I always say is, if you've committed to a fight and you know your units cannot escape, what can you take with you? Well, if you focus down units, because the static defense can just be rebuilt anyway, then at the very least, you're forcing your opponent to rebuild their units, remax their army, etc., and then they can maybe think about attacking you. But if you whittle them down enough, if you reduce their military count enough, you can maybe even the odds. It's all Goliath production with a single Cyclops coming backwards. That's pretty much the only thing. We do have another Goliath falling back as well that was sort of rallied over there. But you can see here too, the macro cycles have slipped here for MoonHunter. He's dedicated more in terms of combatant units, right? Like combat units. He's dedicated a lot more into that than he has into, actually macroing up, even though he's got 3 bases and his opponent's only now getting their third with static defense to boot. DeadInfested still has way more minerals. He's way better saturated in terms of this. So, now MoonHunter's starting to catch up, especially since he does have that extra production, but it just feels to me like maybe this is a time that DeadInfested can, sneak out onto the map and take a bunch of bases. Like, if you've just broken a contain, your first thought is, I need to expand. At the very least, if you're withdrawing with some survivors, as MoonHunter was, you can just waypoint like a Cyclops here, a Goliath here, just start staffing the bases on the map that are likely to be taken. Maybe you have to give this one up. Maybe you've got to give this one up when the army comes, but you can slow it down, and that might actually make the difference as you recover from losing your military and losing your focus and tempo. It's just one unit. It's probably not going to make a huge difference in the fight, so in that case, it's like a little bit of extra target selection from MoonHunter, fighting the units instead of the buildings, and maybe not attacking into a Crucible-empowered double matrix setup. That probably could have helped him out a lot. He could have preserved his contain, or at the very least thinned out the army even further. But he also could have just sent like 1 unit here, 1 unit here, and 1 unit here, and that would have covered his bases, well, covered his opponent's bases, really, prospective bases, so that he doesn't end up needing to worry about an expansion going down. Now, at the same time, DeadInfested has dedicated a lot of resources into that natural for the defense. There's not really any siege weaponry here, because once again, there is no Atlas coming. Only now is there a stockade being built, and there's not really that much gas being mined. He's going to slice on in here and see, oh, there's actually nothing over here. So if he decides to stab up into this base before the engram finishes, maybe he can have some efficacy. I think even with the engram, he could bust this. It's just a question of how he approaches the angle of attack. And when he does show himself and bust that base, at this point, the DeadInfested army can just kind of charge on in. A Solarian has been completed, entirely unbeknownst to me. An Argosy was made, so the second one is on the way. This is going to get really dicey here. MoonHunter absolutely should not be committing to this fight. There's 3 Acantors on the cliff. There's all of these other combat units. He does need to fall back because his army is predominantly ground, entirely ground, really, and it's not going to be good enough. If he kept all these units alive, he could probably fight the Stewards with his Goliaths and such. But he's kind of like half engaging the Acantors and the rest of this Strider Positron army, and half engaging the Stewards. So at this point, yeah, I'm a little bit worried for him. He still thinks that he can just charge on in. I mean, in some ways, you got to admire the brazenness, but the Acantors are just going to absolutely bomb these units to hell and back, and it's just it's not looking too pretty for him, man. He absolutely wanted to keep those Goliaths alive so that he could defend versus the Solarians. They don't do super well when subject to focus fire, but they can do a thing or two when dealing with the Stewards, and the Cyclops, too, for that matter, can also, help reduce the flock of spam units, especially when there's only like 1 or 2 Solarians. And that is the situation over here. We only have one Solarian. If you kept most of your ground army alive, then you could punish any move out with ground units from Dead Infested, and you could potentially threaten that Solarian with a snipe. But at this point, it's all Cyclops, apparently with a single Goliath. Turns out Cyclops might not be busted. And yeah, unfortunately with a gas cap over here in the third base that has gone completely unnoticed anyway, I feel like Dead Infested is going to have plenty of cash to splash. MoonHunter, pretty close to being able to tech up, still never bothered saturating the Vespene Ridge in his main. Did saturate the gas in his third base, however, and I'm still waiting for whether he's going to drop the Atlas anytime soon. Looks like he just spent, where did he buy it? He must have bought it somewhere, right? Right, guys? Oh, there it is. Okay, I was going to say, where did all his gas go? Okay, there it is. So at this point, he should realize my opponent has sat on 2 bases and teched, and they've probably taken a third, and I need to do something to deal with that. So a great choice versus the Solarian is a bunch of Watchdogs, because they do pretty consistent damage. And it looks like, look at that, even a Steward gets stunned over here. But you can see, the Steward has 70 HP. So it only takes Watchdogs, 4 shots to kill it. They shoot pretty fast. You can have a whole stack of them. And sometimes they will target the same unit. So to me, it feels like you can absolutely deal some pretty good damage to the Stewards. And you can essentially make the Solarians kind of worthless if they attack into a bunch of static defense. I guess Anchors, like Cyprians and Anchors could do the job. Cyclops and Anchors could do the job. I don't really agree with Mavericks and Anchors because of the armor of the Steward and, of course, of the Solarian. Maybe you can get some kind of armor rend going, but I don't really think you have any armor rend that targets air units until the Autocrat, which is tier 3, or the Seraph, obviously, which is just easy fodder for it being targeted anyway. So maybe like Autocrat Azazel. That could be a pretty good comp. But again, that's like really high into the tech tree. His Atlas is done. What's he going to do with it? Let's find out. No Palladiums. No nothing. MoonHunter has tier 2. An okay-ish worker count compared to his opponent. Can still compete. Witness spying on everything. Has to stay away from the Atlas because obviously that will detect. But no other detection. I think at this point Dead Infested should be feeling pretty good about just charging on in. He's got the double Solarian, a third one joining the fray. Fourth base being taken here. Palladium finally on the way for MoonHunter. I'm looking around to see if he's got any other production coming. He's going to go ahead and start adding mantles. Honestly, I feel like Cataphracts with their 12 damage, and if you have enough of them, they're probably, I think 4 or 5 Cataphracts at that point. I guess it would probably be 5, 6 Cataphracts. But you could get to a point where those would basically replace the role of Goliaths versus Carriers in classic StarCraft 1 TVP. The Cataphracts would multi-target, deal a decent amount of damage to the Stewards, and just shred them because their attack rate is so high. And their range is actually higher than the Goliath as well, so you can engage the Stewards and the Solarians further away, right? Stewards, for context, are the Interceptor. That's why I keep saying that name. So yeah, to me, I think about it like that, right? You can absolutely do some pretty good damage there if you end up going for it. But that's assuming your Cataphracts can remain at a safe enough distance and not get bopped. Checking out what our players are doing. We have another gas cap coming. Not at the main or natural just yet, but at the 4th base. It doesn't want to sacrifice his gas income anywhere else. And he is adding another Ardent Authority. He's got 4 Ardent Authorities in this stack. Again, the Crucible would be great over here, particularly with the Argosy as well. But it doesn't look like Dead Infested is too interested in adding those just yet. He's got a Witness in the bottom right. He's got another one in the 12 o'clock position. So it feels like he's in a pretty good spot. He's got great map control, great map knowledge. And we actually see Ramses coming out to do Kinetic Pen versus the Stewards. At least that's the intention. But we don't have any Watchdogs, really. We have some Madrigals, which in theory would do pretty well against Stewards, but you need to keep them alive. And there might also still be a bug where they don't actually shoot unless the Solarian is also within range, which is pretty stupid. But even if that bug were fixed, I don't think they would be a good option. I did fix it at some point, so it might actually be fixed. I think Vic told me it's still around, but we also changed it recently in pre-release, so he might have been tested on that. Anyway, the thrust of it is, I don't think that they're a good choice. Actually, in their non-Furia mode, in Imperiosa mode, their default mode, the mode that they're in right now, they could be pretty legit because of the Kinetic Pen, but I'll have to see it to believe it. The Cyclops are now starting to wander on in and get bopped by the Acantors. Here comes the sort of test where the Stewards are out. They do have 3 armor, so they're a little bit hard to put down. Nothing on the high ground over here to engage that army. Madrigals are deployed. I'm not sure that that's going to be super useful. I think, honestly, like, yeah, DeadInfested could just, like, walk around this area. And maybe slice up over here towards the third base. I mean, in theory, MoonHunter can pressure. He does have a fourth base up and running himself. Although it's a little bit understaffed compared to the DeadInfested one. Both of our players in triple digits for workers now. Still looking around here. Do we see any other tech coming? Okay, an Ancestral Archives is a pretty good choice. Again, I think you could probably just A-move the base. There's some Durandals and more Madrigals being made. I want to see Cataphracts out of MoonHunter. I feel like they would do a really, really good job. You could even put them in anchors and such to give them more range to engage this army. But it looks like at this point, there's kind of like a death ball sort of thing happening over here with DeadInfested's military force. And there are some static defenses over here. So it is going to be pretty difficult for the engram to be broken just by a handful of Cyclops. I mean, I say that. They're doing okay. They are whittling it down. Not very cost efficient, mind you. I can't believe it. Cyclops killed an engram. They actually are busted. Well, here comes the big death ball moment. There's only a couple of Madrigals here. They are going to try to charge on in and deploy. Looks like right now, no, I guess they were just left-clicked. Or right-clicked, rather. They're trying to break down the Solarian specifically. It's not a very winning proposition here. So, with that engram gone, there's a chance for this ground army to do some damage, but I just don't think they're going to be enough. Okay, we finally have some Cataphracts. We need, like, maybe 6, 7 more of them. I feel like that's not exactly a winning proposition, although he had the money to potentially put down more. So our players trading the third base positions. And DeadInfested actually going to fall back in an attempt to wipe this army. I don't necessarily mind MoonHunter's position compared to what I thought it would be. I thought this would be just a total disaster because I thought DeadInfested would just A-move and then use reinforcements to wipe this force out. But instead, he's actually returned home, which has bought MoonHunter enough time to fortify with a critical mass of Cataphracts. Unfortunately, the Cataphracts are dying. Oof. There's only one of them. And some Valks. The Acantors were left behind. Or they were on attack move and they were just that slow. And honestly, look at that. The Nexus wasn't even within... The Nexus! It didn't even die! Aw, man. That's gonna be gutting. Worker count now back down to what it was maybe 5 minutes ago. A bunch of idle ones for MoonHunter here. Trying to mass up Madrigal. Cataphract. Yeah, he's got the right idea now. Madrigal, Cataphract, Valkyrie. Okay. You might be able to make something out of that. Although you still need Phalanxes for the ground units or Sentinels or something. You got so many minerals. Could absolutely be dumping a bunch into the Sentinel stacks that you absolutely desperately need. And he only has a couple of Valks, right? So it's a little bit awkward here. I feel like, with the Solarians in mind, it's really, really difficult to fight them. I mean, the Valks are going to come in here and just get blown up and focus down, right? So, I mean, you just look at this army and you're thinking, yeah, there's no shot. This base is also not going to be too long for this world. If I'm in MoonHunter's position, I'm going to try to send like a Mason here, a Mason here. It's not looking like a very winnable game, but you've got a big bank. You, at the very least, could maybe... you know, try to win the slow and not very efficient, like super efficient way, I guess. You have to be hyper efficient because your opponent has way more money than you. See if you can like send some Mavericks out here to like these undefended bases and start bopping them before they get really set up. But I think we can all see the writing on the wall here, folks. We have a critical mass of 8. Count them, 8. Yeah, there they are. Finally, the deployment comes in. I was going to say 8 Solarians. Cataphracts are in play. They're targeting the ground army because they need to target something, but I'm not sure that that's going to be enough. I mean, there's honestly, the fact is the Stewards didn't deal as much damage as we maybe would have thought that they would have done. The count of them was a bit lower, but they distracted some of those units and definitely demoralized MoonHunter, I think it's safe to say. GG is called, and it will be a 4-0 complete sweep here for DeadInfested. And honestly, I feel like MoonHunter just didn't know some of the details of what he could have been doing there. And he's saying it was his last for today. Makes sense. I appreciate him sticking around and playing. And one of the things that I'm really excited about is seeing what, like I said earlier, what these players have been thinking about the project as they play it more, how they're going to practice, how they're going to improve. Because I think DeadInfested could theoretically make it to through a qualifier into Ascension 7, depending on how many other people show up, right? It's getting more competitive over time, so it's a little bit of a whiplash if you're like, oh, wait, no, like, obviously I could beat some of these players that got eliminated at the very least, so I should have a good chance at, you know, making it in there. Like maybe DeadInfested is sizing up the competition. He's thinking, yeah, Luciferius, it depends. MoonHunter, yeah, I can beat those guys. But maybe, you know, somebody like Newt signs up or somebody like Hupsaya signs up, and suddenly it's like, whoa, how am I going to beat these guys? And that's where it starts to get real difficult. So to me, you know, I'll think about like a format for the qualifiers, obviously a little bit separately. But to me, I would love to see these guys play and give it a shot. And when it comes time to run the qualifiers, maybe at the end of this month, at the beginning of the next month, I'd love to have, you know, some replays to cast from those qualifiers of these sorts of things, because we're probably not going to cast those live in the same way. It's just a little bit too many games, most likely. But either way, I'd love to be able to sample, like, out from the qualifier. We do have DeadInfested. You know, I'll do like a little bit of a video on each player that managed to make it in, so to speak, and that'll be hype in and of itself. But thanks for checking out this last game out of the DeadInfested versus MoonHunter set. Two of our, you would say class 2, you know, lower level players, but DeadInfested is showing resilience, and MoonHunter, he's practicing, he's doing some things. He definitely could be more efficient in a few spots. I think when he watches this back, he'll get a lot of interesting lessons or thoughts to sort of apply, and I'd love to see both of these players improve as the game goes on. So enough about what I'd like to see. Tell me what you'd like to see, and of course, well, I guess one last thing I would like to see is more 3s in the bank account.